So we start with the investment opportunities, and hopefully this page is familiar to all of you because you'll have been there many times before. So when writing a proposal, one of the key things you need to do is think about who you're writing for. And one of the first steps as well is, are you applying for the right funding scheme? So GHIT has two. It has the target research platform and the product development platform that I'm going to talk about today. And you can see here what falls into the target research platform. And you can see underneath which disease areas and the fact that it covers all interventions. So step one is make sure you're applying for the right part of the funding scheme. A bit more on the target research platform. They're intentionally broad in scope, but a key point to note is your project shouldn't exceed 2 years. So definitely don't come to us with a 3-year project for the TRP. The proposed collaborations, there are some examples here, but as we've said, it's broad in scope. The product development platform leads on after the TRP, and many projects will actually graduate from one to another. Now, that doesn't mean you have to think about it in your TRP application, but what would happen is you would come in again for a product development proposal. And again, at the bottom here, you can see the scope and the interventions that we're going to cover. Now, when you're writing anything, whether it be a scientific paper, whether it be a proposal, you need to keep in mind what your audience is going to be, what they need to do with the document, and what they need to get out of it. So what happens to your proposals when they come into us? So the first point is the intent to apply form, which is going to go into the GHIT management team. So they need to be sure that it's going to fall within the scope. So you need to be really clear exactly what you're applying to do. If that's okay, there'll be a full proposal submission. Again, the eligibility will be reviewed, and hopefully at that point, it's going to get sent out for external reviewers. And those external reviewers will take a look at it and they will comment on a number of different criteria. What then happens is that the scores of the expert reviewers and their comments get aggregated, and the top projects will go through to the selection committee. This is a really important point. We get more projects in than we can actually take through to a selection committee meeting. So if your project is not good enough, it won't get through. And you really want to get through to the selection committee because this is the first time you get to present in person your project to the people who are going to make the decision. Up until then, it's all been a paper exercise. So that paper exercise is really important because it's your gateway to the selection committee. Here is just a brief look at the timelines. This is the current request for proposals. The request was released in November, and if you're going to apply, do it by December. Now, a key point here is that you're encouraged to submit your intent to apply as soon as possible. Because one of the things to do if you're trying to write a good proposal is to allow yourself enough time to do it. So you need to get that in as quickly as possible. Now, GHIT are very helpful to you because once you get through that intent to apply stage, they provide you with a lot of really good templates that you're going to use. So a Gantt chart template and the budget template, but it's this one, your proposal, where most of your attention is probably going to be focused and will likely be the most time consuming. So what you're all here for, what are the key elements to writing a good proposal? At Wellcome, we like to refer to something called grantsmanship. So grantsmanship is the technique, the ability to write a good proposal. And we particularly like this quote from Jacob here, who says, "Poor grantsmanship can turn a good, well thought through idea into an unfundable grant proposal. Good writing won't save bad ideas, but bad writing can kill good ones." If you make it really difficult for us to understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it, it won't get through. So I sit on the selection committee on behalf of the Wellcome Trust. This round, I've been reviewing, I think, about 25 applications this round, and then I'll see the top ones of those at the selection committee. This is what I want. I want the excitement, the tingle factor of seeing a really good and exciting idea in a proposal. I need to know what you're going to do, why you're doing it, what's the unmet need, what's the problem you're going to solve. And then I need to see it set out clearly, how you're going to do that, what the steps are, and that will lead to us being excited about the proposal. So how do I get there, or how do you get there, more importantly? Developing the vision, and this is where I think a lot of the proposals I see fall down. So we want to know what the unmet need you're going to meet is, why you're going to do it the way you're doing it. And the tool that most pharmaceutical companies will use will be a target product profile. But this is not something necessarily that academics are completely familiar with. But what we're looking for is not necessarily a detailed document, but some headlines to show that you know what the problem is and why it needs solving. So here it's got the ultimate goal in mind, what you'd really like to achieve, and what would probably do. And an early stage target product profile will include some information that's estimated or may not even be available. We may just need a few lines on what you're trying to do, but we do need to have something that sets out your vision for what the project's trying to do. I've put here some elements of a target product profile. This one has been taken predominantly, I think, from a vaccine one, but you can see there's all sorts of things here. The indication for use, obviously. The target population. Now, this is not only the patients, but also think about where in the healthcare system is this likely to be used. Is it hospital? Is it community? Depending on what your technology is or whether it's a drug. Is the target population children? Do you need to think about the formulation in response to that? How many times is it going to be dosed? You may not know that. But if you take a look at, for example, the malaria portfolio, we're talking about trying to cure in one dose. Is that what you're aiming for? So the project needs to think about this, and this includes even the target research projects. We don't need full details, but we need to have some idea of what you're aiming for. Read the questions carefully and ensure that you're providing the necessary information in the correct place. As I said, I've got 25 applications, or I had 25 applications to review, and this is on top of my day job, and I will have a limited time in which to do them. I don't want to have to be going through the application to find information that's in the wrong place. So really make sure that you're putting the information where it needs to be. Don't give me pages of information talking about the background to the target, if you can sum it up in a paragraph. So many applications, I think perhaps people who are less confident about writing a proposal think that writing a lot helps, but it doesn't if it doesn't tell me much more than I could find out in a paragraph. You need to provide sufficient supporting data and scientific evidence to justify your proposed project. We'll need to see some data. And this is a general concept, actually. It can be helpful to ask someone outside the immediate project to review a draft. You, if you're doing this project, you love this project. You really want to do this project. It's your favorite child. You're not going to see clearly. You need to get someone more objective to look it over and ask you some tricky questions about it. Also, don't assume that all the reviewers will know the subject area as well as you do. If there are some new developments that maybe not everybody's heard of, make sure you capture them in the proposal so we get a full idea of what you're trying to do. There should be realistic and detailed development plans with well-defined milestones and activities, and this is key. Many applicants often see a milestone as the completion of an activity. That's not a milestone. The milestone should tell us at the completion of that activity, what will you have? What will you have delivered? Is it a cell culture batch with so many grams of protein in it? Is it a particular positive result in a particular assay? What will you deliver at the end of that milestone? And we also want to know, what is a go or a no-go? What does success look like for that part of the project? How will you know? How will you be able to tell us that it's worth continuing to fund it? What is the success criterion? Risks. There is a section on risks in the form, which asks you to think about the risks that might be associated with the delivery of your project. Now, science is inherently risky. We know it fails a lot of the time, and we understand that. But are there some points that you could see that might add perhaps additional risk to your project that you could do something about? So it could be, for example, time delays. If it takes longer than expected to get your batch of cells delivered, what do you do? What does it do to the overall project timelines? Is there any way you could have a plan B to cope with that? There could also be changes in external factors, such as regulations, change in regulatory authority pronouncements. Now, you can't necessarily know what those are, but usually at the start of your project, you'll know if there's likely to be something coming along. Perhaps there are rumours going around. Talk to us about those. Let us know what the potential risks for your project are. Ensure that you are aware of others working in the same field, and this is really important. First of all, we don't want to duplicate work that's being done by others. But also you might identify potential collaborators if you know who else is working in the field. If there is someone else working in the field, but you think you've got an advantage, that you can do something that they can't, or you have an insight that they don't have, you need to make that clear to us. What is the difference? Why is your project worth funding if there's something similar already ongoing? Also, it could affect existing or future intellectual property, although intellectual property doesn't always have to be necessary to the commercialization and implementation of a product, it can be absolutely key. So we need to be mindful of what happens to any potential intellectual property. So when I'm evaluating, what am I going to be looking at? I've given you some key points. So GHIT will make sure that there's a partnership that's in a disease area that is eligible for the scheme, and it's within the funding scope, that you've applied for the right part of the GHIT funding. I want to know that the unmet needs are going to be well addressed, that you've set out clearly for me why this needs doing and why you're the people to do it, that you don't duplicate the existing research unless you're going to show me some advantage. And, as I say, the advantage, a unique contribution to the disease. Now, I've put here for science and technology, the possibility of success seems high, but we do invest in high-risk projects, and it depends which area they're in. If they're really exciting and novel, or they're in an area where there's absolutely nothing else out there, we will go high risk. That you're proposing valid methodologies. You can develop new methodologies as part of your project, but again, why are they being developed? How are you going to know that they are then valid once you've developed them? That your objectives and your milestones are clear and realistic. Don't try and do too much within the time frame. If you're applying for a TRP and it's 2 years or under, don't try and cram a 3-year project into a 2-year timescale. We will notice. That you've got your criteria for advancement at each milestone. So again, the success criteria, that you're going to be clear what success looks like and it's worth proceeding. And that you've got those risk and mitigation plans. We'll want to know that the partners are qualified, you all provide your CVs, which is excellent, and we definitely need clarity on who's doing what in the project, and again, there's parts of the template that address that. And again, that the timeline and budget are appropriate, both for what you're trying to do and for the part of the scheme you're trying to apply for. Working on GHIT Selection Committee has been one of the great pleasures of my scientific career. I see some absolutely amazing projects and some collaborations that never would have come about because of this. So if you've been turned down before, don't give up.